Welcome to another episode of Joan Deserves a Musical, where I talk about my efforts to turn the life of Joan of Arc into a family-friendly animated musical. And today I want to revisit the topic of theme. One of my earliest episodes, I talked about theme, and I went back and forth on a lot of things. But a lot has happened since then. The songs have been written, the script's been totally revised to accommodate those songs. I've had lots of conversations with lots of people, and I now have a clarity on theme that I didn't have before. I'm still not. This is not a world I usually work in. I was not an English major. I don't know a lot about literature. Um, Talking about theme feels very abstract to me, and it's so I'm not sure I'm nailing this. But the reason I keep coming back to it is the executive producer of that I'm working with, hoping to sell this thing to, asked me very explicitly, "What is the theme, and is this the hero's journey?" And asked some specific questions about that. And I've realized at that time, a year ago, I had no idea how to answer those questions. And now, just recently, because of the way the script has developed and I think achieved its final or almost final form, I can answer both at the same time, which is pretty wild. So, in my previous conversation about theme, I talked about how I like the idea of faith. Joan had faith. There are lots of stories about believing in yourself, and this is not a story about believing in yourself. It's about believing in something bigger than yourself, and that is faith. But I also talked about how I'm nervous about the word faith because I don't want people to see this as a faith-based film. There are lots of reasons it should not be marketed as a faith-based film, and so I felt a little stuck there. But as I've been developing this and exploring it, I've become really fascinated with the idea of trust. Trust feels like a circle that contains the circle of faith within it, right? If faith is trust in a higher power or that good things will happen, trust that's just like one aspect of trust. Trust, we can talk about like trust with each other, trust in yourself, trust in a lot of different things, right? Um, and I have been looking and looking for a word. And it's funny, I came upon the word trust and I went and looked, and there's this song at the heart of the whole musical. Joan and Charles sing a duet together. I've talked about that in previous episodes. Um, and and the way Amanda has written it, trust is a word that recurs a lot in that song. They talk about when it's not easy to trust and what makes it easier to trust, and how can you trust, and I think that is at the crux of this story. And it's opened up so many different things for me because I can look at every relationship in this story through the lens of trust. Does this person trust that person? Do they trust that this is going to work? There are just so many questions it opens up. And it's enabled me to fine tune a lot of dialogue and a lot of interactions, just as I think, do these two trust each other or do they not trust each other? Because there are a lot of people that don't trust Joan. And kind of the whole story is she needs to gain people's trust, right? And the reason it's a musical is because looking at the historical record, it's very hard to understand how this 17-year-old girl could get military leaders and a king to trust her to lead armies, which is a thing she had never done before. How she could even trust the voices that were telling her to do this thing. And so we insert songs, right? Songs mediate these hard parts and bring us along emotionally. Oh, of course the military leader listens to her because she just sang a really great gospel flavored song, right? And so that is kind of at the crux of this. And then she gets Charles to trust her, but it becomes clear that Charles does not trust himself. And Joan is going out and fighting these battles and leading the armies and making progress, but it becomes very discouraging. And she has this all is lost moment, like many heroes do. And the saints tell her that she is not the one who is going to bring peace to France. That's Charles's job. She just needs to get him on the throne. And so it's an interesting turning point because the whole story has been Joan trying to get people to trust her. Now she needs to get people, including Charles, to trust Charles. Charles doesn't trust himself. A lot of people don't trust him to be a good leader. Certainly the enemy, all the French people who had defected and were loyal to the English crown, did not trust him to be king, did not think he even had a claim on the throne. And so that's an important moment. And then he gives this little speech to some dissenters and asks them to trust him, and they do, and that is how we get to our happily ever after. And so this is really exciting to me because I think I mentioned in the previous episode that about theme that a friend of mine told me that he had heard that theme is the tool that a protagonist uses to win the final battle or to overcome the final hurdle, or to get to victory, however they do that. And it's interesting because, and then also when the executive producer asked me about hero's journey, he said, what is the lie she believes at the beginning that she learns is untrue? And in the context of all this trust and things, she thought she would be the one to win this victory. And she thought if she just got people to trust her, that would be good enough. But what she learns is that she and everyone else needs to trust Charles, and Charles needs to trust himself so he can become worthy to be king, so that he can then bring about peace in France. So that solves this theme issue, and it solves the hero's journey issue, and it brings everything together quite nicely, and it fits really well with the music. So I don't know if you said what is the theme of a movie or a story or a book or whatever, and someone said trust, if that is quite a complete enough answer. I don't know if a one-word answer is okay for theme. Sometimes it seems to be painted that way. But I think if I get an opportunity to talk to this executive producer next month, as I'm hoping to do, then we can discuss trust and all the different aspects of trust that are explored. It is an exploration of what trust means and who you should and shouldn't trust, and when you should trust them and when you should not. And I think that's a pretty good theme. So I feel like there's been a lot of growth between this episode on theme and the previous episode on theme, which is really exciting to me because it was only a couple months ago. And so that is where we are at currently. And I'll be back next week with more and hopefully an update. Hopefully by next week, I will have something scheduled with this executive producer. And if I do, I will certainly be telling you all about that.